Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for attending this Spark Venture funding webinar, where our two excellent prospects, Altach BioMedical and Binarii Labs, will be presenting this afternoon. And for those of you that are new to the format or new to Spark, my name is Gary McCarthy, and I'm one of the Spark team within Spark Private that looks after those investors that are building private portfolios of venture capital companies. As I said, we have two excellent candidates today. This is our actual, I think it's our sixth and seventh funding round of the year. For those that are looking further ahead, it's a pretty healthy pipeline of companies to come. But we are, I think that's one of the sort of the USPs for Spark, is that there's a continual flow of opportunities throughout the year. So thank you all for attending today. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. There is a Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, which to use for any questions, not the chat line, but that's the format, and we will leave the questions till the end, and my colleague Fergal Power will also help with the Q&A, which will be done between presentations. But first up, this afternoon, I'm delighted to welcome Tamir Kozlowski, Chief Executive of Altach BioMedical. In their own words, they have developed Cartifix, and this is the first tissue-specific type 2 collagen-based regenerative implant for repairing cartilage. And if you're like me and your knees are creaking, this is a massive opportunity in terms of an unmet medical need in terms of being able to regenerate cartilage. So it's an exciting innovation. Tamir will do a much better job of explaining the specifics of it, but I can talk a little bit about on the numbers, in that this is an investment that qualifies as a 50% EIS badged tax rebate. I think in this current funding round, there are already €2.5 million of monies committed to funding Altach, which is obviously a really, really good and impressive traction in amongst the investment world. And I think the other thing to note within those monies raised or committed to date is that there's a strong VC representation in that investor base. There's NLC based in the Netherlands are investing, and also Castanho are in the syndicate too. So suffice to say, if you've already raised €2.5 million of investment, we're well on the way to completing the funding round, and we're very lucky as Spark investors to have the opportunity to top up that investment total. We are actually 95% funded in terms of the target for the round, but I think Tamir will agree with us that he's more than happy to take a little bit more. But it is great to see that the level of funding already achieved. So well done, Tamir. But I'll leave now the details of the product and the really impressive milestones that have been achieved. It should be worth saying that this is actually Altach's second raise through Spark, but I think it'll be really interesting for our listeners and watchers today, and to hear about the milestones that have been achieved, and actually the valuation uplift also delivered to date. So without further ado, I'll pass over to you, Tamir, and you can share your screen. Thank you.
So good afternoon, everyone. Firstly, thank you very much for giving your time up today to listen about Altach and the opportunity and our product. My name is Tamir Kozlowski, and I'm the CEO of Altach BioMedical, and we're based in Dublin, Ireland. And our goal at Altach is to become the gold standard in cartilage repair and delaying the onset of osteoarthritis. So osteoarthritis is one of the leading causes of joint-related disabilities today, with 1 in 6 adults in the US suffering from it today. Now, cartilage defects are painful, they impair our physical activity, and they lower our quality of life. Unfortunately, cartilage as a tissue does not possess an innate ability to heal itself, and currently there's not really been a treatment that has fully succeeded in regenerating our native cartilage. And unfortunately, when these defects are untreated, they do lead to OA. Hence the big push from the surgeons and the industry for what we call joint preserving technologies. So technologies that preserve our joint and delay the onset of osteoarthritis. But again, no gold standard is available today. So what Altach is looking to do is to fulfill a big unmet need in the market for a biological regenerative solution that bridges the gap between existing early stage technologies and a knee replacement. So we're looking for patients who are already beginning to suffer from osteoarthritis and have larger defects. And Altach's technology will enable them to push back the need for a knee replacement for 10 to 15 years. So our product is a collagen-based scaffold based on over 10 years of research at Trinity College in Dublin. And it has a few unique properties. Firstly, it's what we call a tissue-specific implant. And what we mean by that is that it's the only product of its kind on the market today that is made from the same tissue that we are looking to heal. So in our case, we're looking to heal the cartilage and the bone, and that's what the product is made from. So it's made from type 2 collagen, which is what our native healthy cartilage is made from, and from bone. So it can be implanted in a single stage procedure, which separates it from other products which require two-stage procedures. And ultimately, what's important, it restores our native cartilage and regenerates it. And we've proven that in animal models. To help you visualize the product, I'd just like to play a short animation, which visualizes the implant here and showcases the two layers of the scaffold. So we have the superior layer, which is made from type 2 collagen, and the bottom layer, which is made from bone. Now, our implant has a unique property that when it's wet, it has full memory retention. And why this is important is that it allows us to perform the procedure in what we call minimally invasive fashion, so arthroscopically. And we've developed a proprietary delivery device that you can see here that allows surgeons to implant this minimally invasive through arthroscopy that enables quicker rehab and lowers the risk of infection for patients. And ultimately, as we mentioned, restores the cartilage. Now, we've proven this in various animal models that we've published and in peer-reviewed journals. And without going into too much detail here, what we've shown is that the cartilage that grows back as a result of using our implant has the same biological properties and structure as your healthy cartilage. So in summary, we feel that Altach's solution offers a few key advantages over what's out there on the market today. So firstly, the aforementioned surgical technique, which is minimally invasive. A lot of our competitors require opening the knee or in the surgery, which heightens the risk of infection and means for a longer recovery. The aforementioned tissue specificity of the implant, and also the fact that it can be used as a standalone product, but it can also be combined with other technologies, cell-based technologies that are available today, which surgeons use day to day, such as PRP or stem cells. And it can also be used for smaller defects as well as large osteochondral defects. So our technology is protected by a patent, which was granted in the US in 2024. And actually, this week we've had some very good news from the European Patent Office, and we were granted our European patent this week as well. In terms of the market for cartilage repair, it's forecasted to reach 4.9 billion in 2027. And we believe that Altach's solution offers a serviceable, obtainable market of 400 million. So our team at Altach is a mix of world-class scientists and industry professionals. But also as part of this round, we are looking to greatly increase our team in terms of a quality management professional, staff for our new production facility in Galway, as well as a fractional CFO. As part of this round, we'll be also expanding our scientific advisory board, as well as creating a dedicated board of directors comprised of veterans in this space, primarily US-based, to support our FDA activities. So obviously this is a journey it's difficult to do on your own, and we have a number of key partners that we work with, the key of which I'll show here. So firstly, Trinity College. As mentioned, our inventors are active members of faculty at Trinity, and we are continuing our collaboration with Trinity both in terms of R&D as well as applying for non-dilutive funding opportunities. Secondly, BioMedical is a Dutch company which specializes in bringing orthopedic products to market. And they have a track record of bringing over 100 products to market so far. And they are our main regulatory and quality management advisors, and they are working with us together to bring this product to the market. And finally, we have Biopharma, which is a UK-based company specializing in freeze-drying biomaterials, and they are our chosen contract manufacturer for the actual production of the implant itself. So where are we today, and how long are we away from market and ultimately acquisition? So we are currently in what we call our verification and validation stage, where we are required to perform all the necessary regulatory testing, such as biocompatibility, bioburden, viral and activation studies required by the FDA and the MDR. This will culminate in a full-scale GLP animal trial forecasted to begin in 2027, which will then allow us to perform our first in human safety trial, slated to take place in 2028, which is required by the FDA, and its focus is on safety, not efficacy, which then ultimately allows us to perform our PMA pivotal trial forecasted to begin in 2028 and slated to end in 2030. So in terms of the progress we've made since our formation of the company, so as mentioned at the beginning by Gary, we have previously raised 1.5 million in 2024, which included Spark crowdfunding investors. And since that time, we've been making significant progress in key areas. Firstly, we've established a regulatory and quality management roadmap together with the setup of a full QMS system with BioMedical. We've established a functional R&D laboratory, which will now transition into an ECM production facility in Galway. And we are in advanced preparations for our animal trials together with our partners in Veranex in Paris. We also began contact with the FDA via the submission of what we call a pre-RFD, which is a request for device designation, and we will be continuing to engage with the FDA on regulatory submissions as the project progresses. So as mentioned, we are currently looking for a 2.5 million seed round, which as Gary said is subscribed. And this round is really to transition us through the verification and validation stages, execute a GLP animal trial, and begin preparations for our first in human safety trial. And both these steps are a significant value inflection point for medical devices. In terms of exit opportunities, our goal ultimately is to be acquired by one of the leading orthopedic OEMs present on the US market, such as Stryker, Zimmer Biomet, or Arthrex, and to show you some of the potential for acquisition in this space. In the last couple of years, we've had 2 or 3 major acquisitions. So CartiHeal, which is one of our competitors, was acquired by Smith & Nephew in 2023 for 330 million. And BioRes, which is a collagen-based scaffold, but for a slightly different indication, was acquired by ConMed for 246 million. And so ultimately our goal is, upon the conclusion of the FDA trial, is to be acquired at that point, and evidence suggests that is usually the case for OEMs in this space. So thank you very much, and I'll be glad to take any questions you may have at this point. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Near. I have a question here, if that's okay, just from someone just before the webinar started. So in terms of headcount at the moment, where are you at the moment, and after the funding, kind of what kind of levels of personnel do you envisage? And also maybe just an idea, you mentioned there in the slide, key personnel to be hired, maybe some of the roles and some of the specialists that you require.
Yeah, so currently with our previous round, our goal was very much on keeping the company as lean as possible. So ultimately, as of today, in terms of full-time employees, it's myself and Dr. David Brow, who was one of the founders and is now our CTO, and who's leading the facility and the R&D work in Galway. And we've been up till this moment very heavily involved, as I mentioned, with those partner companies, so BioMedical primarily and Biopharma, leveraging their expertise. But as we get closer now to the first in human trials and more clinical activity, we're looking to increase that headcount. So as mentioned, one of the key areas is the quality management area, because with the production facility up and running, we need quality managements there. So there'll be a quality management specialist joining production staff for the Galway facility. Also a fractional CFO will be joining, and as mentioned, a significant uptick in our scientific advisory board. So the engagement of KOLs, which we will begin collaborating with in preparation for our clinical trials.
Perfect. Thanks.
Thanks, Tamir. Another question coming in here. Just in terms of, I suppose, the first in human trials, when do they start and what sort of are the significant milestones before then?
So as shown on the regulatory slide, to be allowed, at least for our product, which is a class 3 medical device, be able to perform first in human studies, it's a requirement to do a full GLP animal trial. This will be performed on sheep. We have a protocol and a partner in place, which is a company called Veranex in France. So that will begin in 2027 and will last 6 months. And upon the conclusion of that trial, we'll be able to perform our first in human safety trial in 2028. As mentioned, the safety trial is required by the FDA, and the endpoint is not necessarily clinical in terms of efficacy. It's more about adverse events and safety. However, that is a huge milestone, usually in terms of value inflection, because it does signify the first in human usage of a medical device. And upon that conclusion, you are then allowed to perform the full pivotal trial, which, as mentioned, will begin after that and will take 2 years.
Thanks, Tamir. Just a little bit of housekeeping here. I'm just noticing the Q&A, if you can use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen to enter in the questions, just if anyone's using the chat, it won't get seen. So just actually, I'll follow on here because I've just got another one come through. Just around, I suppose, exits, really, realistically, when could, I suppose, discussion start? Doesn't actually necessarily have to happen at time of market entry or after market entry, but just can you paint a few scenarios there, Tamir, if you could?
Yes, ultimately, so in previous years, you would see indications of companies investing in such technologies as ours prior to the full pivotal trial. But in recent years, that seems to have shifted in terms of less investment, but rather acquisition upon FDA approval. But those conversations begin quite early in the clinical trial. So once the clinical trial is on the way, obviously you have interim endpoints. So even though the trial may require a 24-month follow-up, at 6 months and 12 months, you already have significant data. And especially with cartilage technologies, the efficacy of the device is usually going to be seen at a 6-month time point and window. So with a large number of patients, that 6 months time point is usually the beginning of those conversations, because they're very early on, you can see the efficacy of the product and anticipate a successful trial. So I would say the sort of first year of that pivotal trial is when those conversations begin.
And there is just a connected question to that, just based on precedent, really. The two recent exits that were cited in your slides there for similar companies, where did they take place? Were they post FDA approval or
they were upon FDA approval? Yeah. So CartiHeal, upon receiving its PMA or FDA approval, was immediately acquired, and very similar for BioRes. Again, a successful FDA approval was the trigger for the exit.
Fergal, you get anything there?
Yeah, so just on some of the risks and key risks, what are the areas that pose the kind of the highest risks to the FDA process, Tamir? Really, what do you envisage being more difficult hurdles?
Well, ultimately, as with any FDA, any medical device, the biggest risk is the transition from animal trials to human trials. Yes. Now we've been very successful in our animal models so far, and obviously there is a strong correlation historically from other products between a successful animal trial and a human trial. But ultimately, there is always, with medical devices, the underlying risk that the implant will not perform as well as expected in an animal. But that can be mitigated, of course, by proper trial design, the right patient group, and the work we do before. In terms of regulatory risk, one of the reasons we've engaged with the FDA as early as now, multiple years before, is that the FDA is actively involved in this process. So when you make agreements or the FDA signs off, say, for on the class of the device or signs off on the protocol, they stick to those agreements with the company. So you de-risk the opportunity of doing a trial or doing work that then the FDA doesn't approve. So all of this is agreed upon in advance with the FDA and signed off by the FDA. So we're trying to de-risk that as much as possible.
Excellent. And I have a follow-up actually just on that in terms of the next round. So we're at a 10 million pre-money valuation now. To get to those first in human clinical trials, where do you see, what amount do you see necessary? Is there, and how many human trials do you need to carry out? And a kind of an idea of what valuation from there as well that you'd be raising that kind of probably.
So this round, as mentioned, we're looking to put ourselves in a position basically just to ready to go for the first in human trial. So we will be looking to raise a small or relatively small follow-on round for the execution of that first in human safety trial, which will be around 1.5 million.
Mhm.
And that will be followed by a larger 20 million round approximately for the full pivotal trial. And the reason we structured this way is obviously we want to increase the valuation by reaching these GLP animal trial milestones and then the first in human safety trial before raising that larger amount. Now, looking at comparative companies in our space that are, say, a year or two ahead of us, and that data is available on PitchBook and other websites and funding. The hitting of the first in human usually results in a 4-5x jump of the valuation of the company, which is, of course, required to successfully raise the final round.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
Just one coming in here, Tamir, as well. On you mentioned again in the slides the progress made, well, the successful completion of project around Galway. What's the significance of the manufacturing, the setup in Galway?
So our product, without going into too much detail, is the way we make the product is comprised of two major steps. So the first step is processing. As you know, the product is animal derived, so it comes from porcine tissue. And the first step in making our product is processing that tissue, removing all DNA, viruses, and everything else that's there, and creating what we call an ECM, so extra collagen matrix. And that first step, it will be done entirely in Galway. And then that ECM is sent to Biopharma in the UK, who do the actual freeze drying and making that into a scaffold itself. So it's sort of two elements. And the first element will be done entirely in Galway. And we're in the process now of setting up a clean room facility there. And some of the proceeds from this round will be spent on setting up that clean room and enabling full scale sort of production. At least full scale in the sense of what we need for the next steps. Yes, of course, because this isn't commercial yet, but enough to provide our needs for the animal trial and the human trials that follow.
Very good. One other for me, and it's going back to that question around milestones, but this is really, as you say, we're 95% funded at the moment, so anticipating the round to close reasonably quickly. Can you sort of explain a little bit about what's very significant for you in the next 12 months post-close in terms of milestones and what investors can expect in terms of, I suppose, Altach's development?
So ultimately, it's conclusion of the required testing that we have to do. So before we are allowed to execute any trial, so whether it's the animal trial or the first in human trial, the product has to be finished. And what I mean by that, finished in every sense, in terms of packaging, the delivery device, sterilization, all the testing. So it has to be a product that's ready to go, because ultimately, once the clinical trial starts, you can't make any changes to the product. So these next 12 months will be executing on that. So getting us ready to a finished product, including the instrumentation, and also within this 12 months will be a small feasibility trial for the animals to make sure we test the implant and the surgical technique before we then do the full GLP trial in 27.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Thanks, you.
No, all good on our end. Yeah.
There's just one here, just on I suppose capital structure and also the balance sheet. I just wanted to confirm there's no debt on the balance sheet, and then across the sort of the capital structure, there are no different. You know, the share types are all similar.
Yes, it's all one share type. And yes, there's currently no debts on the balance sheet, and the existing, so this round, as mentioned, is almost closed, and it's comprised primarily of the existing shareholder base.
Very good. One final question just coming in now is just it goes back probably to the Galway topic or the Galway project. What are the risks in scaling up the manufacturing? What attaches to that particular side of things in terms of risk?
So this is something that one of the reasons we actually decided to. So it was some of the early investors may remember when we first raised our initial ECM manufacturing was going to be outsourced, and we were working with a company in the Netherlands called HCM. But ultimately, due to concerns on scale up and ability to react quickly, we felt that moving it in-house would offer us greater control over the process and also the ability to improve the yield and the scale up of the process. And already since moving to Galway, we've already seen great improvements in that. So it was a strategic decision to give us more control on that matter and actually mitigate the risk of then an external party not being able to scale up as we progress.
All righty, thanks, Tamir. That was great to go through the more recent developments. Also, good timing for the webinar in terms of good news this week in Europe. And I think that's obviously something just in a sort of a general roundup. We've had milestones delivered. You've got big, significant venture capital support. I think the intellectual property protection news also highlights the innovation and the disruptive nature of this particular product. And I think that, again, the 50% EIS tax rebate rate should not be ignored by any investors. Tamir, thank you very much. We'll now move swiftly on.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
To our next presenter is Aidan Finn, Chief Executive, Founder of Binarii Labs. I have mentioned EIS already today, but Binarii is, again, as I mentioned at the outset, on its second fundraise with Spark. I think we raised close to $1 million the first time around. The good news is that Aidan and his team have already been busy on the fundraising front and have raised €883,000 already. They've managed to keep a small sliver of 250K for Spark investors, and that will attract a 35% EIS tax rebate. And just to refresh memories, or for those that are new to Binarii, and I do see there's quite a few new investors on the webinar today. Binarii's innovation is very topical and timely in terms of it is a patented data security platform designed to give organizations, big and small, ownership and control of unstructured data. It's very innovative. It's an interesting solution for lots of organizations, particularly in the space where data integrity and protection is so important. So thinking, banking institutions, government type entities, and it's a very exciting year for Binarii. And I think I'm going to let Aidan talk you through the various market platforms that they've got access to now. So over to you, Aidan.
Thank you, Gary, and thank you all for joining. Let me share screen here. So we jump straight into, as Gary said, Aidan Finn is my name. I'm the CEO. I'm one of the co-founders here at Binarii Labs. We're actually based here in Nova, UCD, and the University College Dublin campus. And just sharing screen. Sorry, I wasn't sharing. So we jump straight into it. And Gary mentioned some of these. I think people will see the trend of cybersecurity headlines in terms of, and recognize that there's a big increase in the number of issues and instances, but may not see some of the subtle nuances that are changing the landscape quite significantly and placing greater burden on the enterprises themselves. And that if it was to boil it down into one word, is dependency. It's not the headline here, relying on a single storage provider, which is now the most dangerous form of convenience, isn't just a catchphrase. It's actually something that's now been embedded into international data regulation and directives. So why is this? Well, the status quo, as it were, is somewhat the problem. And the problem is how, we generally store files. Files are stored in complete file form, and they're stored in secure locations, be they on-prem or cloud providers. We're generally trusting a custodian to mine those files for us and to, by contract, give us continuous access to them when we need them. Proactive enterprises will ensure that they keep files extra secure by backing them up, which is really just replicating that process. Take another file, a copy of the file, and put it into another place and make sure it's kept secure. That's simplifying it, but that's the general principle. Another problem with that, apart from, your data isn't really yours in that context, that you give it to a provider and they have the data and you rely on them to always give you access. That's one way it's no longer yours. The other way is that it's actually not even ours. And that's starkly illustrated in Europe, where 90% of EU data is currently being controlled by non-EU providers. So continuing the theme of dependency being the vulnerability, one of the vulnerabilities of dependency here is that is so much power in the larger providers. 72% of all global enterprise data is controlled by just 4 private US companies right now. And that's a scary reality when you consider the current geopolitical environment. The reality is your provider goes down and you lose your access to the data. A government maybe could issue a lawful request for access and either get a copy of your data or take it from you. And the unfortunate reality right now with physical war emerging is that data centers, which are essentially the physical infrastructure that provide the ability to store data in the cloud, are under physical attack. Continuing on that theme, this is the first time, March was the first time we've ever seen a major storage provider have to issue an advice that essentially their normal process for moving data from one center to another in the event of an issue, which is called their failover or their alternative zone strategies, failed. And it failed because multiple centers of theirs were hit and damaged and offline at the same time. And the advice for the first time ever was for clients to move the data completely out of that region into a safe zone. So what do? Well, we process the file completely differently. So, we're not another software solution that allows people to monitor where their data is or where there's any issues or, any sort of threat detection. What we are doing is we're fundamentally processing the data file in a very different way. So what we do, if we look at the data file journey through our process, is we break the file into, first of all, we duplicate the file immediately. So essentially we create that backup live, which in itself is unique. So on a file by file basis on upload, we have a backup. The backup and original file are broken up into fragments. Fragments are encrypted and mixed up and distributed to 3 storage locations that are owned by the end user client, not by us. We're not storing anything on anyone's behalf. We are allowing the enterprise to use their trusted providers, but not have, and trust that they will provide that service excellently as they do, but not have to trust them ever with any single file. And what we mean by that is when the file fragments are sent to each location, only part components of each file goes to each location. But it's always a guarantee through our process, and this is a proprietary patented approach, that across any 2 of the 3 locations, you will always have guaranteed the complete components of every single file. But just again, no one provider will ever hold the complete components of any one file. So what that means is if any endpoint goes down, business continuity is enabled because the enterprise has continued access uninterrupted to those data files. If worst case scenario, that endpoint or storage location was breached, the bad actor has only access to useless and incomplete information. Following the directives of don't put all your eggs in one basket, or in cloud terms, they call them buckets, is good advice, but it's very hard and very expensive and very complex to follow. And it still replicates the problem I said from the outset, that multi-cloud solutions or multi-storage location solutions still involve giving a complete file to each provider. So even if you have a backup secure, you still have a problem where you've lost data, and that's unavoidable. And that's a significant burden administratively if any event happens, whereby you must report it within 24 hours in a regulated sector. With us, you don't actually have that burden of reporting, because if one endpoint has been impacted, you don't reach the critical threshold. And it's not that we advocate that issues should not be reported. It's that we enable people to manage their security first and report second, because reporting to the National Cybersecurity Centres is actually a very positive thing, where you get a good reputation in the event of reporting what they call a near miss instead of a breach. The market for this is growing, it's huge. We look at the serviceable addressable market of 88 billion by 2030, which is growing at a CAGR of 17.2%. We look at that because it's the closest we can align and fit into, which is called the data loss prevention tools market. And that is what we do, albeit we're a wider deep tech solution. We have forecasted our serviceable obtainable market by 2032 will reach 72 million. This particular raise, as Gary mentioned earlier, is our second. We've raised 3 million to date. We've raised another 850 within this round, in addition to the 3 million. And why we are raising is really for growth and expansion of scaling. It's not for further development. We do obviously continue to support our solution and develop it with a product roadmap, but we've moved from needing to build to now shipping and selling and onboarding and dealing with iterative improvements as we go along. A huge piece of news for us is that TD SYNNEX, who are the world's largest Microsoft Tier 1 channel partner, have actually funded an organization called We Transact, who are former Microsoft Marketplace experts, to choose 8 companies globally to work with, to bring them through at a much earlier stage than they would normally ever be allowed to the TD SYNNEX platform, which is the premium seller for enterprise resellers. So enterprise resellers do not buy from Microsoft, they buy from a premium tier 1 provider, and TD SYNNEX are the largest in the market. So we're not just getting listing and access and distribution, we're actually getting a 12-month funded support from We Transact to matchmake to the correct resellers in the right sectors, and to really push revenue to our listing, not just focus on how we list. Western Comstor are an equivalent similar organization who are our go-to-market partner in AWS, where we're already approved, and we are currently onboarding. So to date, without having started with any of the large formal channel partners, we've actually been working with, at this stage, we have 31 independent specialist resellers globally, US, UK, Ireland, Africa, Europe, and Asia. We have had significant validation and certifications required throughout this process. So ISO 27001 is a certification, SOC 2 is another one we have acquired, NIST CSF is a US cyber classification that we required and we have, and we're HIPAA compliant as well, because those align with the sectors we work within. Gary mentioned the exciting year that this is, and it really is, in terms of moving from you know, zero really in terms of recurring revenue leads 12 months ago, to now having 264 individual leads in our funnel, totaling over 50 million, and 1 million at very, very late stage, close to conversion. We spoke about exits earlier, and we're in a similar situation where we're tracking activity and acquisition. And what's happening is a very clear trend now is private equity is actually investing in tier one resellers and tier one platforms, and private equity is investing in them for acquisition and acquisitive growth. We're partnered with 4 absolutely well, acquisitive partners that have demonstrated that over the last number of years. And we are highlighting in green here that in 2029, 2030, we believe our exit is in between the 200 million to 300 million valuation at that point, as we track forward with the revenue projections. That would be backed up very much by one Irish fellow Enterprise Ireland client, Get Visibility, acquired by ForcePoint are owned by US San Francisco private equity. They were working with them for 2 years, reselling their solution, and then they made a very quick move to move in and acquire, literally within a number of weeks, actually, because they were so familiar with the solution and the team and the manner in which they work. So as I say, we're raising 1.85 million. That's on top of having 3 million to date, with the help of a very healthy 2023 Spark round, with the thanks of 186 individual investors to reach almost 1 million from Spark alone. European funding from the European Innovation Fund through EIT Digital came to 400,000 in total. Enterprise Ireland High Potential Startup Investment is an equity investment of 400,000 also included. Our price points or our unit economics we've shown here are split, and that's because we are being supported by the resellers to present 2 versions, if you like, of what we have. One is a platform integration, and that platform integration is the higher spend, with unit economics of minimum 25,000 up to 350,000. Well, there is no limit really, but 350,000 is one we've shown here, compared to the smaller, quicker consumed and easier consumed by small and medium enterprise of 4,000 to 40,000 spend on an annualized basis. As a team, Stephen is the inventor and CTO. Kieran is our co-founder and Chief Business Development Officer, and myself. Bruno Sullivan is our very first hire, and is our COO, and has been in place as a real rock in our development over the last number of years. We have a fantastic growing team, but still quite lean. I point to Sean McDermott because he is a 25 years plus senior vice president experience in a company called Akamai Technologies, a US-based private cloud and security company. He did his review and due diligence on us by visiting us in person, spending a couple of days with us before he chose to invest at the very earliest stages of our opening this round. And Sean is in line to be a director, pending a director, interim director as such, in the US for when we establish there. We do have a base there available to us from some of our US angel investors, so we can actually, and we've great support from Enterprise Ireland, so we can and will have boots on the ground pretty soon, but not whilst having to expend any great amount of capital. So again, this growth capital that we're raising is going into the marketplace, supporting the implementation of rollout of frictionless onboarding for reaching new clients, acquiring new clients, and retaining them as sticky, through additional resource in that regard, and also to build out our own business development function, again more towards supporting those, well, not more towards, completely towards supporting those resellers, as distinct from any form of direct selling, which we are not doing. So think that is it in terms of the presentation, Gary. So happy to run through any questions or anything I might have missed there as I sped through it.
Yeah, perfect. I have a question here that I was actually asked yesterday from an investor, Aidan, an unusual one, but an interesting one nevertheless. So the concept and the idea, can you kind of give us a background of how it was formed, and where it came from?
Yeah, well, Stephen worked in the 90s in JP Morgan in New York, and at that time, it was a time when data started to become gold, particularly for them, as he was charged with building a digital derivatives trading platform, which was the world's first. So their oracle literally was their value, and their oracle was the price points they were getting as data, and they had to protect that with their lives. Something he was paranoid about anyway, as a person who was not just a technologist but involved in risk and compliance. So there was lots of approaches that have happened over the years for breaking up data, right? Usually it's keys rather than files. But the principle is quite similar. There's lots of problems inherent with that process, though. You break up a key and you hide it in some random computer somewhere, the enterprise can't stand over that. They don't know where that computer is. They don't know who owns it. So there was lots of these aspirational solutions that were being built that technically were sound and made sense for distributing data. But none of them were ever really embraced by enterprise because they just couldn't, because they wouldn't pass muster from a risk and compliance perspective. So actually, the aha moment is kind of amusing. It comes from Harry Potter and the seven Horlicks, and Stephen was watching it with his children and went, "Hang on a sec, you bring the seven Horlicks together, you get all the power. Why don't we do this with a data file? Instead of keys, why don't we apply this to files?" And like any great inventor, he's just started tinkering with it and built it, while then had the foresight to protect it with a patent early on. So the principle, again, it sounds complex and it is a deep tech, but the simple, again, maybe to reiterate what's happening with the file, instead, the big risk is, even in a very secure location, putting one big file or any file, size file, in one location, because then that file sits complete in that location. You protect it, you encrypt it, it's still at risk when it's intercepted, or when your access to that location goes down, you've lost access to it. So by breaking it up and hiding it, you're only achieving a certain amount of protection, because what if someone loses one of those pieces? So what we've solved for is that problem, and that problem is, but through our proprietary process of duplication, fragmentation, and a unique algorithmic distribution, we're ensuring that every single time this distribution of a file happens, which is live on upload, there's no latency issue here, by the way. We've been stress tested by independents up to huge volumes, and there's no latency issue. So when that happens, it means that we've solved the previous problems that came with trying to distribute fragments or shards, as they call it, by making sure that there is always available the complete components of the file at all times across any 2 to 3. Hope that makes sense.
Thanks, Aidan. I'm just conscious of the time, just clicking along there. So, I mean, we can take some of the more expansive, responses we can do offline as well, and we can hit the sort of the highlights on this particular forum. But just on just moving away from product more towards the bottom line, the revenues. Just, you've mentioned the significance of TD SYNNEX and the sort of the reseller mechanism. But if we could go into the mechanics of that, I suppose, first off, what does it mean in terms of cost around, does that avoid recruiting and the cost of sales?
Yeah, no, 100%. So, like I said, Gary, without going direct, we're saving a fortune. We're also actually going a well-trodden path into the sellers who are already servicing the clients. Many of them are what they call advanced specialist partners, who are really trusted systems integrators. They design and architect systems. They're not just, Microsoft resellers. So we've now signed with already 4 of those in advance of being allowed to go into the partner network. We can't go live with that until we're in the partner network, and that's ongoing, which will be done over the next weeks. So yeah, saving costs, but optimizing access by minimizing friction.
And just to follow up on that, then you mentioned the go live phraseology. I mean, it's going live. So what's the expectation from yourselves again in terms of revenue milestones for the next 12 months? When do the first ones, hit?
Yeah. So in the funnel, like we're top of funnel right now, without or bottom of funnel really, the deepest, the closest to conversion, without any channel partners or advanced specialist partners being included in that yet, because we're not live. We have 10 leads from 6 resellers who combine to over $1 million. Okay, 300K is at approval stage where it's approved but not PO'd yet. So it's gone to upstairs to CFO or procurement for PO. And the other deals of 700K approx are approved essentially internally, but are waiting for a final decision. So that's just narrowing, in a 50 million funnel, which we have in total, over 264 individual leads. That's just narrowing right into the tip of the funnel. We're parking that and moving to channel partners. There is a journey of us matchmaking with the specific resellers, a little bit of working with them, educate them, and going forward. But we've said, we've an objective of 660K for this year in our forecast, and we've an objective of 3 million next year. We're not jumping from 600 to 3 million by going back to zero. We're jumping because of the size of the funnel and the growth of the funnel ongoing as it's been building over the last few months. But we anticipate this year, maybe 300K of the 600K to come from those channel partners. But at the same time, we're aware we have a very significant late stage of funnel that could convert into it. And so we would hope to exceed it, but we're not saying that. Well, I just did, but we're not saying that out loud.
Fair enough. No, thank you. And just you mentioned the journey bit, and that's sort of could fast forward from the beginning or the middle to the end. Those reseller relationships are important, but what are the names that kind of crop up, and our, I suppose, even for our investors to keep an eye on, that would be likely suitors at an exit stage?
Okay. Well, there's 2 of them we know we can't name because we're under NDA with them. And that's not for acquisition, that's reseller agreements pending. But to maybe give you a profile would be better. Okay, I'll give you one that we are working with, and that's the one, but not engaged with yet. And that's the one I mentioned, the ForcePoint. ForcePoint are now a very, very large global reseller owned by San Francisco private equity. They bought Get Visibility in Cork, which was an offspring from SmartTech 247 cybersecurity solution. And they were 2 years working with them, selling their solutions, and then they just bought them outright. That is a trend. Some of them are huge, like Google bought Wick for 4 billion. That'd be great, but it's a different prospect. So there's a whole range, a whole spectrum from sort of 200 million up to 4 billion that's been occurring, but it's very much moved towards that trade acquisition of the reseller and the reseller being owned or taken over by private equity. Private equity is piling into specialist partners and resellers in a considerable way, and there's certainly 5 well-known Irish firms that fit that bill that we are talking to.
Thank you. Fergal, one for you.
Yeah, just a question on the product and the solution. Where do you sit in comparison to your competitors on the cost, the price point, Aidan?
We're saving money as a whole. And usually that's because when you factor in a lot of considerations in the tech stack. So it's not that we're directly competing on cost, which is only one, is that we're replacing the need for maybe 3 or 4 components in the tech stack. And we're definitely, so where we compete very favorably is the multi-cloud providers that do a software download kit and allow you to use their dashboard to add different cloud providers, and that's all they do. And it's a lot, but it's not what we do. And that's going to be pretty expensive. And usually it's with an awful lot of add-on services that people are paying for, like the consulting and the architecture. We don't do that. We just give them the API documentation under NDA. They're an opportunity to review. They sign up, they pay us, and then they get full access to start connecting. Or as I say, they can subscribe to our front end solution, which does the same thing for the smaller business.
And a follow on from that as well, I suppose government contracts and government tenders are very lucrative as well, and it's a lot of focus, particularly in Ireland and the UK at the moment with recent regulations. So have you voyaged into that area?
I'm glad you mentioned that, because none of that, we are active in that regard, and none of that is included in that funnel I mentioned. We're live and approved at late stage with 5 public mandates right now. Those are in consortiums. The typical consortium value is about 4.5 million over 3 years. We would be maybe 20% of the mandate in terms of what we would earn from it. One is in Ireland, 2 are in Ireland actually. One is in the US, in California, and the others in the UK. We are also being added right now by approval, and we've been pre-approved for 4 frameworks in the UK, which are necessary cybersecurity frameworks, which you only get access to once you've passed the public procurement test. So we've done that. It's in the process of final stage of approval, and we have 3 actually resellers who are dedicated public sector writers. So what they are doing is constantly reviewing mandates and bringing them to us, and then they also write them in partnership with us, and that's their contribution as a reseller. So we're very active, and it's been really great for us getting traction as well with other sellers and other partners who then have used us for regular opportunities to add to the funnel apart from public. So it's been really helpful and really healthy.
One final question. I'm very conscious of time, so this can be a really quick answer. But I suppose I'm conscious that the questioner is the same in terms of you've raised before through Spark, you've brought on some clients where now the funnel's got much bigger. But with the clients that have already come on board, what's the retention rate or the turnover rate?
It's 100% currently.
Good answer. Short answer too. Yeah, well, we'll finish on that very high 100% note. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I think these are 2 outstanding prospects. We know them well. The milestones as they've gone through today that they've delivered on is very encouraging, and there's no better validation when you see institutions and industry connected people come in with pretty decent checks and already be a huge part of the funding round. And really the role of Spark investors in this one is just to top off the rounds as such, but a great validation both in terms of milestones achieved and traction got with customers or with trials, but also I think more importantly or certainly significantly is the professional institutional backing that both of these excellent innovations are getting in the marketplace. So thank you everybody. And we look forward to, obviously, if there are any follow-on queries, please pass on the questions to the team here, Fergal, myself, or Melissa, or Chris. And also, again, if you had to jump off early or came late, there will be a recording of this session too, so we can send that on to you too. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.
That's great.